concept come first or the story came first? Because this is such a wildly different way, a medium than you've used before that I've seen in your published work. So how did that happen?
I mean, so the story is like I was trying to get over something that happened a long time before, and I couldn't. And usually with memoir, I wait until I'm over it. Every other book that I've written, like that was memoir, it's always after I'm over it, so I get perspective, you know, so it doesn't like demonize the person. You know, it's just it's the advice I always give with memoir. But like this just wasn't going away, and I was not smart enough to get therapy yet, which this book would not be available if I'd gone to therapy. So it was kind of for myself that I just like I have to write about this. And I actually had written about it through fiction. I have a young adult trilogy it's a graphic novel trilogy. One of them's banned in Texas.
That means it's good.
Doesn't it? Although I do think it's good, but that's not why it was banned. It was banned for queer content, and honestly, there's no queer content in that book, but in the other two there is, and those aren't banned. So, but we could talk about that some other time. So really, I kind of just started playing with the iPad a couple years earlier, and I just figured out that I could make collage with an iPad, and so I was really excited about that artistically, but at the same time I was trying to kind of get over my own shit, non-artistically, personally, and so those two combined really sweetly. And then when I was searching for a visual language, I basically went back to this image, and this is a life-size, it's way bigger than this, life-size, double-sided collage made of magazine bits, and on the outside is digital, and on the inside is the paper. This is in my studio. It got damaged in 2000, might have been 2009. I created it in 2005. It took a couple years, but it got damaged at a gallery, and it was just devastating. And so I kind of wanted a place for this to exist. So I started with the idea of these flowers inside of me. So this is called Love and Death. On the other side is another image that's of me filled with clouds floating away on a white background, I think. No, I filled with other flowers, sorry. But so I started from this concept of me being filled with flowers, kind of as an idea of me filled with idealism and love from my friend Jody, not her real name, and that was that was the first visual metaphor I came up with. Another one is the cover of the book, which you see throughout the book is this kind of lilac or wisteria color. It's a collage that I made, and that smell of those flowers bring about like this really nostalgic feeling. I get a deja vu, so I thought that would be my metaphor for memory. And so you might see like puffs of this flower appear in like the corner of a page, and that signifies like, oh, I'm starting to remember, or I'm grasping for a memory. And then the pages where you see just this bright, vibrant purple, that's me remembering something. There's a lot of repetition in here. There's a lot of backgrounds, which you might have noticed of the corkboard. When I started making this book, what I was doing was I was trying to remember, like, okay, what was our friendship like? I was writing down all our the diary entries and her letters and all that, and I just had corkboards all over my studio, and I was just like rearranging them to like how my memory fit, to the chronology of everything, lots of post-it notes, and so the corkboard is to me kind of like the canvas of my mind. But there's metaphors, like every single image that I use there's a reason it's there, but I never explain it, and I just kind of hope that like the reader intuits it, which so that's how it came about.
No, it's really impressive for those of you who are familiar with like more traditional comics. Mari has done a lot of that too, but this is just something I had never seen before, and what I thought was so brilliant about this book was the fact that you are questioning memory at the same time as telling the pieces of the memory. And so we almost have two timelines that are happening. There's the current Mari who's trying to figure out, and then there's the past Maris, I should say, that are, these sort of like vignettes almost kind of pop up, and but then the diary entries and the notes, like I've just never seen anything quite like that cataloged. How in the world did you pitch that book?
Oh gosh. Well, when I was making the book, I wasn't even sure if it was going to turn into a book. Like in my head, I'm like, this feels like a large multimedia installation. Like, I mean, basically something that will never make money, which also is this book. But so I was like, I wasn't sure how this was going to go through. I feel like I got about even more than halfway through the book, not even knowing this is going nowhere. This story is going nowhere. What is even this story? It's just me spinning in my head about this person who doesn't even probably think about me anymore. Like, what the hell am I doing? But then something happened in real life, and then that moved the story forward. But you need the book for that. Yeah, pitching is a different. I don't know. I mentioned the book that's banned in Texas. It's also a weird book. It was also very difficult to pitch. It's like a teen drama. It's a young adult trilogy that also involves alien abductions, maybe. But it was kind of based on this person, and I wasn't ready to write about her yet because this stuff was just happening. I was just finding out about certain things about her, about our friendship that I thought, I made peace with before, but it turns out things weren't what I thought. So I was putting him into fiction, but that's irrelevant. Like I basically wanted to do something, like tell a story, but not in the boring, the kind of format that I've been doing so far, because I'd already done it. Like I wanted to do something new. And so I told that story, the trilogy, through different points of view, which isn't new, but with different art styles for each point of view, and then they change throughout the books depending on how that person's point of view changed. And that was so hard. I feel like we pitched that for like 10 years. And finally, the editor who picked it up happened to already be a fan of my work, Dragon's Breath. So and he totally got me, and it was great. I don't really think about my audience or the market when I'm working, because that's just going to terrify me and make me not make anything.
But the fact that exists, like a publisher, I mean, and it's beautiful. The pages are, they're just as colorful and vivid when they're in. I mean, honestly, like it's a testament to your work, though, because it was one of the first things Rebecca had said when we were discussing your book, and I just thought like, oh sure, it's graphic, and then I'm thumbing through the book and I thought, there's no way a publisher saw that and said, yes, let's do that, because really, it's impressive.
It's really hard to publish anything that's outside of anything that's not middle grade and just easy to print is really hard to publish right now. And even now, with all the book bans and stuff, I feel like that's just increasing the problems. Any whiff of queerness, any multiracial anything is so hard right now. But there are also, there are a lot of people who are, on the side of, not being a complete fascist who want to help push that forward. So there's good people. So this originally got picked up by another press, and then they had to drop it because of the pandemic. Prices for printing had gone up so high that they could not find a printer that would print this for less. They would have to sell it for $50 a book for a tiny book. And they're like, we can't do this. We can wait for the printing to go down, the cost to go down, or you can have your rights back. So I asked for my rights back, and I went with Field Mouse, which is a fairly new, they're a 4-year-old press, and they are nonprofit. They exist solely to publish books that no one else wants, that they think are moving the conversation forward. There are people like that, publishers like that out there who are specifically not in it for the money, not in it for themselves. They just want to further literature. There's a lot of them. Any small press, behind any small press, you're going to find people who have no time for themselves, who spend all their money, all their energy, all their passion into helping other people. So there's good people out there.
Yeah, well, it really shows. Just for those who aren't familiar with your hero origin story. Do you mind telling us like how you landed like here?
Oh gosh.
I mean, with respect to illustrating and telling your story.
Yeah.
So.
In a nutshell, I wanted to be a novelist when I was a kid, and I wrote my first novel at age 18, my second novel at age 21. Neither of them sold, thank God. But I tried. I really tried. I tried to get them published, and once I realized that the publishing world absolutely sucks, I was like, okay, no, new plan, new life plan, which was I'm going to do something else. I loved writing, so I got into the video game, randomly got into video games. Like, I loved playing video games, and I ended up writing for video games for a long time, and that's how I supported my habit. And around that same time, I kind of discovered for myself underground comics, and that's what inspired me to tell my own story. Specifically, Diane Newman's anthology Twisted Sisters had a story by Mary Fleener called The Jelly, about her hot mess of a roommate, and I was like, I've had bad roommates. Like, I tell these stories all the time. I could do this. Like, I never even considered telling my own story without the fiction framework, because who did that? Like, celebrities? But like, these punk rock women were just like totally bearing it all, and I loved it. And so then I just kind of self-published zines, got into anthologies. Like, this was my hobby. And then 14 years later, I became an overnight star. No, just kidding. I got my first book published, which was Kiss and Tell, a romantic resume, which was about my sex life from ages 0 to 22. Crushes, kisses, really like problematic relationships. All of it was included. Although I didn't really include Jody, because I just didn't know how to write about her yet, and that was still happening. So that was my first book, and then about a year into it, I realized I was getting so many opportunities for comics coming in that I couldn't keep up with it and keep up with my workload in video games, and so I had to make a decision. And at that point, I had just gotten married to my partner, and we had a conversation, and he has a great job, or he had a great job, and he still has a great job, and I'm like, well, do you want to be with a poor cartoonist or like a fairly successful writer in video games? He's like, go do the comics thing. Let's see how that works out. And so I quit in my mind. I was like, I'm going to turn down the next job. But at that point in time, that part of my industry in the video games folded. So I never actually got to turn anyone down. But like, even though it technically broke up with me, I broke up with it first in my mind. So
yeah, you definitely made the first move.
I did. Yes.
How terrifying is that, to commit to your art and expect your art to support you?
I mean, I don't know. I've been homeless like twice in my life, or houseless, or I've done all sorts of things, and I've like gotten by. I'm not really afraid of anything. Well, now, right this second, I'm a little afraid of fascism. But as far as that kind of hurdle, like I know that I'm scrappy enough to like pick myself. I didn't graduate high school. Like, I didn't do the normal things that people do. And I think I'm all the better for it. I wouldn't recommend other people necessarily take that route, especially now it's different. But I got by. I don't know. Maybe it's just privilege, or magical thinking. Like, I used to hitchhike all the time, and nothing bad ever happened. So.
Please don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Absolutely not.
So when you
that was too much information.
No, because that does make you who you are. This punk rock, non-binary royalty. Like, that's so much of, like, as a fan, like, what we all get drawn to. So when the little seed of a story happens in your mind, what comes first? The visuals, the story?
It's different every time. Yeah, okay. Every single time. The process is different every time, much to the chagrin of my publishers. But yeah, it's never the same. But like, I get bored. Like, so Turning Japanese was, I think, the first book that sold really well, and that came out in 2015. I think I finished in 2012 or 13, but it took a while. And because that sold well, every publisher ever since, or every time we submit something, the publisher's always like, oh, well, do they want to draw on that style again? I'm like, no, I've done it. Like, that was it. It was fun. I'm ready to move on. And I don't think my next book is going to look like I Thought You Loved Me, but I'm definitely, like, it's going to, I think, have flavors from that. I don't know, like, after I turned 50, I just got really into embroidering and crafting, and I hated crafting my entire life. Anything that had to do with string or glue just makes me crazy, but suddenly I loved it. I wonder if it's like an age thing.
I started crocheting during the pandemic.
Oh,
and like,
wow.
Yeah, and my mom's texting me this morning about quilting, and I'm like, who am I turning into?
Oh, I love it. I know I'm going to be quilting at some point. Like, it's so cool. But like, yeah, I just got back from Japan. I'm like still jet lagged from it. It's been less than a week that I've been back. But I was like, okay, I'm going to be gone for a month. I'm not bringing my embroidery stuff. I'm just going to do my own thing. I'm just going to live life. But like, I couldn't. Like, as soon as I got there, as soon as I saw Daiso, I'm like, embroidery stuff. So I just like rebought all the string and all the embroidery stuff, and I embroidered Mudang like just like with a fevered passion. I'm like, I gotta get this hippo done. And like, I mean, I was practically crying. I was just like, it's just so cute. I can't. I don't know where this is going. My next book might be crocheted, or no, I don't know how to crochet. But you never know.
Yeah. So, but you're willing to like experiment with stuff. Like,
I have to.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Maybe it's like a mental illness. I don't know, but like I just like the thing that drives me is just joy and feeling joy of like just experimenting with new things. And this book was really heavy for me. There's a lot of just like revisiting awful things that happened to people around me or myself. But the joy of making the actual art completely sustained me throughout. I mean, it's not totally dark. Like there's some funny parts and whatever, but like I was just having so much fun with the art, and I really hope it comes through. Like it was just really fun.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and I find as a reader when I sit with images like this, I just take a moment, right? Instead of just turning the page quickly, like I just take a moment to think about not just the metaphor, but like the beauty of all that. Like, is all of this individually cut?
Yeah. So the sides of it, I kind of cut off digitally, but like basically, like everything inside, those are cut with scissors. You actually see a running stitch, but that's just paint. So like, I guess like sewing has been in my thoughts, but like I can't even sew a button, so I don't even know what the heck I'm doing. But I'm just having so much fun with it.
It shows.
And I don't like to sit down and learn things. I just want to do it and just make my own mistakes, because I get really bored when, this is why I quit high school. I don't like being taught things, like, because my brain's like, oh, my brain doesn't work like that. It wants to be taught a different way. It wants to make some mistakes. And because, I don't know, mistakes are where you get all your like brilliant ideas.
It's true.
So.
It's true. I think there's an image of that work on your Instagram page somewhere. I know I've seen it recently.
Yeah.
Way down there. It's in there somewhere.
Yeah. Beautiful. Even the little kitty cat too. She died in 2009. She's old, but yeah. So she kind of represents death there, because she's filled with lilies and other poinsettias and other things that kill cats. So that.
I didn't even put those things together. It's just such a touching image. I'm a cat person, so like I see a cat next to a human, and I'm like, this is a human who has a cat. Like your cats, typically, unless they hate you, they always want to be nearby you. So it's so sweet.
She's my best friend. She would crawl under the covers with me and sleep there. And I just remember one time I woke up and I farted in my sleep, and it farted so hard it woke me up, and it woke her up too, and she started purring. Like she thought the fart was like some kind of active like affection. Okay, now I am doing too. Am I sorry? Sorry. Thank you for coming. Don't leave.
But also pets carry like our deepest emotions too. We grieve with them, and we love hard on them, and when we're feeling these other feelings, we put that onto them physically, and there's something really special about those relationships. So I'm so drawn to this image.
I have 8 animals. I understand.
8. What do you have?
4 cats, 4 dogs. They were mostly unplanned.
Unplanned pet parenting. Yeah, the best way.
I mean, I decided on the first dog, and then I decided on a second dog to be with the first dog. Turns out dogs don't need another dog. That just makes them want to be with you more. Anyway, I'll stop talking about animals, but yeah, it's a lot of fur.
Yeah, that's awesome. So is there anything that is off limits for you in terms of storytelling? Because it seems like you've covered some of the dark corners of your life, but maybe I'm just assuming?
My rule generally is you don't write about things until I'm over them, so I've broken that. Tell my own secrets, but not other people's secrets, which, that's very nebulous. But that's my golden rule, and I try to abide by that. I've had a lot of missteps over time. People got mad at me, whatever. I mean, there's really no way to avoid hurting people, even when you're not writing about them, because they take it personally. Even then, I don't know. It's just changing.
Do you ever feel like the people in your life are in your head when you're trying to tell these stories? What will my partner think, or what will my parents think, or have you developed a system where you can just push them out of that space?
I'm always slightly aware, not when I'm just writing it,
Okay.
but when I'm editing.
Sure.
What am I going to share with the public? So a lot of stuff gets cut. It usually gets cut for other reasons, though, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
And if I find that something that involves someone else that's a little touchy is really integral to the story, I'll talk to them if there's someone that I still want in my life. So, I mean, I think about it, but I don't let it dictate what I'm writing.
And I think for me as a fiction writer, I can hide myself.
They always think that you're writing about them, though.
It's so
everyone.
true. Yeah.
And
but,
you're not necessarily.
But as a memoirist, you are putting yourself out there a little bit more. I at least get to lie and say, it's not me, it's not me. I look like me, but it's not me.
No one believes you.
Yeah, that's true. They don't. My parents, first thing.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, but if that makes you feel better.
Yeah, exactly. What has been your experiences working with different publishers versus self-publishing zines? And is it better to work for yourself in those, if, let's say, the money was all the same?
Nah, that's not the
Yeah.
world that we live in.
No, it's not. It's definitely not.
I mean, they each have something good about them. Like working with a big publisher versus working with a small publisher is so different. And I've worked with both, and micro publishers, small publishers. My first book was published by HarperCollins,
It's big.
So that was my first experience, and so I had no basis for comparison, although I'd been self-publishing for 14 years. Self-publishing is instant gratification. I think everyone to a degree does self-publish now if they're putting it on Instagram. You're bam, it's out there. But also, it's out there. It tends to be unedited when you put it on or when I put something on Instagram. I'm oh, that felt really good to draw. I want instantly to put it out there, and so people are responding to it immediately, and that can feel really good or can feel really bad. But also you can rescind it. You can delete that, which is kind of good, but kind of bad. If you publish something that is out there for good, even self-publishing a zine, I can't believe you have
Those are Rebecca's, yeah.
that was it, Said While Talking, which I think is cute, but I was kind of doing that. I was drawing that while I was drawing Dragon's Breath and Other True Stories, which is really heavy, and that was really light, and I needed the balance, or else I would go crazy. I'm a little crazy, but
Good crazy.
yeah. Sometimes I'm on meds. It's fine. I don't know. There are pros and cons. Obviously, when you're working with someone like a big publisher, you're probably not going to be the biggest fish in their water park. I was a minnow. The same day that my first book came out, Justin Bieber's book was also coming out, which was a collection of his unedited tweets.
Oh, no way.
That was the same thing, but that's how they paid for my book, so I can't be mad.
No, not at all.
All the Bieber heads or whatever they were called were funding my book.
Yeah.
So yay. But also, like, the amount of publicity they put into my book was different. Like, yeah, it was just extremely different. The problem with a very small publisher like Field Mouse is like the distribution problem.
Sure.
They've tried, but they can't get an account with the bigger distributors, which means that it's really hard for libraries and bookstores to carry them. So even though I hired a publicist and like I just did all the things right and it got great reviews, like I was really lucky that people liked it too, because it's such a weird book. I mean, it was in the Washington Post, it was in the LA Times, it was all over, but like no one can get it, unless they go online, which is like, that's good, but also no one can get it. Like, it's really hard, and that's the problem with a small publisher. And there used to be small press distribution that just shut down recently, so now it's going to be even harder. I mean, capitalism is the problem, really, with publishing. I don't know how anyone stays afloat, honestly. Like, anyway, instant gratification, or like in the case of Turning Japanese, like that came out like I think 2 or 3 years after I made it. So it's like, and then I had to go on tour and talk about it like it just happened, and and then it just got reprinted like last year, and you're like, oh, finally, like a big publisher, is giving it the distribution like I wanted the whole time, but like I'm so far removed from that book now that it's almost like it's happening to someone else.
Sure.
It's complicated.
Yeah. No, I just think about too, like in a world where everyone's trying to hustle their art too, and like what the responsibility, when you do work with a smaller publisher, like how much of that is falling on you to sort of push it, and all of it, yeah.
I mean, they help.
Yeah.
I think of like agents and publishers and that sort of thing, and PR people. Like, if you could afford a PR person, like I basically just stuck all my money into this PR person. She was lovely, and now I know what a PR person can do, which is a lot.
Right.
But they can't get you in libraries necessarily. It got 2-star reviews, like, which is generally librarians look for starred reviews, but they couldn't get it because it's not in the distribution system. Sorry, what was the question?
No, I was just asking about like when you have to hustle for your life, for your art.
I think I hustled the most on my first book.
Okay.
Although I might have, it's possible I hustled equally on all the other books, but like it felt like the most because I'd never done it before. So I mean, I basically quit my day job. My job was a freelance writer for video games, which was a really cool job because I would work really hard for like 6 months, like nonstop working for 6 months on a video game, ship that, and then for like the next 6 months or the 4 months, I would have time to work on whatever I wanted, and that was like a really ideal thing for me. The hustle was rough because I had heard with when you publish a book that you have 3 months to make it or break it.
Oh, wow.
And like that was just, I don't know where I heard it. It's untrue. I found. But like this was like just the common knowledge at the time. Right. So I was like, okay, well, I know they're not going to put a lot into this book, so I've got to do this. By a stroke of good luck, I got invited to go on a book tour with Sister Spit at the time. Ooh. So that was my first time book touring. It was with a group of strangers, 7 strangers in a van going across the country, even into Canada, and as soon as I got back, I had my San Francisco book launch, and so I started my own book tour in earnest. And at the time, I'm like, okay, I gotta hustle. I hated digital comics at the time, but I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this digital comics thing. I mean, I was drawing them, on paper, but I was scanning them and uploading them to become webcomics. So I had Said While Talking, Smoke in Your Eyes. I had a local paper that was publishing restaurant and other reviews in San Francisco, sfba.ca. So I had a number of webcomics running at the same time. I was working so hard, and this was all to support Kiss and Tell, because I wanted people to know about it.
Sure.
And oh my God, I've never worked so hard. Like, and my hand was just like a little claw from drawing all the time. Like, it was just constantly, like, all I thought about was like, how do I push this further? How do I push this further? Trying everything. I was going on like Reddit. I went on 4chan, which I would not recommend. I'm like every possible venue. I'm going to try to get this out there. I thought it didn't work. After a few months, it turned out they had sold less than 1,000 after 3 months. I'm like, I'm a failure. I will never publish another book again. And I was deep into turning Japanese at the time, and that was around the time where my agent just couldn't. So HarperCollins refused my next book, which I didn't know that was a thing that would happen. I'm like, oh yeah, I have a publisher. They'll be with me forever. That didn't happen. And then my agent and I went separate ways because we just had different ideas of where he should be sending my book. Like, he had kind of a mainstream idea. I'm like, they're not going to be interested in my book. So we went our separate ways. I'm like, okay, well, I self-published for 14 years. I could do it again. After I got my first rejection, I'm like, I can't handle this. I need another agent. So there was an agent I befriended on Twitter because we made each other laugh, and so we interviewed each other, and over the course of like a number of months, he finally decided to take on turning Japanese. And at that point, I just felt like a failure. Like, I couldn't get my agent and I had split ways. Like, no one wanted, like, my book hadn't sold. I just felt like a complete failure. But like, at this point, I had enough material for like another book, which was turning Japanese, which was Dragon's Breath and Other True Stories, and because that was mostly webcomic stuff. And I'm like, oh, I guess I should make a zine, but like, I was working so much that by the time I had time to sit down and make a zine, there were like 300 pages, and I'm like, okay, that's not a zine. And I'm like, well, I guess and I asked my agent if he wanted to push it, and he's like, well, those don't really sell. I'm like, okay, so I'll just self-publish it. And I went to the people who were publishing Turning Japanese. I'm like, well, I'm going to self-publish this, but can I use your distribution? You want to put your name on it, and like, but I'll pay for everything. And they're like, you know what? Let's call this a first run before we do Turning Japanese. We'll publish it for you. And then my agent's like, well, I'll help you with the contract. He helps me with all sorts of things. And then it got nominated for an Eisner, and it did really well. And I'm like, what is even happening? And then that book came out, and then Turning Japanese came out, and I didn't really have much time to think of it. And that was like a very small press, but they did have distribution because I made them get it. when I interviewed with them, I'm like, yeah, you have to get distribution. By the time I thought, so I was doing all these conventions, and I was selling my books, and I ran out of Kiss and Tell. And so I went and called them, and this was like 2 years into it. And I'm like, oh, I need more books, author's copies. And she's like, sorry, we're out. I'm like, what? And she's like, oh, you contact your editor. They need to reprint them. I'm like, wait, 10,000 copies are gone? Like, and I was just like, oh, okay, that 3 months thing is bullshit.
Yeah.
Right?
Look at me.
Yeah, so I think, I don't know for certain, but like maybe the webcomics work, or maybe the Eisner nomination, although that book didn't sell particularly well. Like, I don't know, but like, the hustle, it's cumulative.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as like overnight, whatever. I don't know. I mean, there is. It just doesn't happen to me.
Right. I wanted to ask you a question that just like flew out of my head.
I love your outfit.
Oh, thank you. Yesterday I was speaking to a student. We were talking about your work, and I had mentioned the video game thing, and he was like, that's the dream job as a writer. And that's what I wanted to pose to you. I mean, if anyone in the room was interested in that kind of, career path, what was that like for you?
I mean, I fell into it. I really liked video games until I started working with them. And I always knew I wanted to write, so I'm like, well, and video games were going into like they were starting to get stories, and so that was exciting. So I'm like, well, I want to do that. I ended up, like, the way to become a writer at that time, there were no writers at the time. It was always like, oh, well, if you work on the design team or your production or whatever, then you get to write. They would, if you wanted to write, they would let you write. So that was the path that I was going for. And the way to get to there was become a tester, and there was like a way that you did it. I did test. I was a tester for a while, but then I wanted to do it at Sega, but they didn't have room in the test department, so I got a job in HR, and then I was just kind of like skipping around in Sega until like a job opening happened in the localization department. And by that time I knew everyone at the company, so it was really easy to like insert myself. And then I quit my job because it didn't pay very well, and I had a lot of bills, and the dot boom or whatever you call it was happening, and like someone just like offered me twice as much as I was making, and like so I left the best job I'd ever had basically with other people, but like also I paid off my credit cards eventually. So I don't know, but then I'd made the contacts, so like people knew I liked to write, and so every time a job came up, they would think of me. I mean, this is not how you do it now. Like now there's some other way. Like I don't know what that way is. Like so when people ask me that, I'm like, well, it's not the 90s anymore. Like video games was a very different place.
But creatively, did it satisfy like that writerly? Oh, okay, okay.
Which is why I would do I would take turns with video games and comics. I mean, it would deplete me.
Sure.
And that's the problem. If you are a creative person and you want to do your own creative things, and then you get a creative job, like generally speaking, that doesn't work out because you get depleted. This is what happened with a lot of my friends in comics who took animation jobs. They stopped making comics because they just didn't have any kind of life in them for that. I find that I am most creative when I have really shitty jobs, like data entry, or like I worked at a bank, and that just like I was so unhappy that I was like, I gotta write, or read comics or whatever. But like, when I'm in a happy creative job, like I also am kind of spiritually depleted, creatively depleted. So I don't think it's a great. I mean, some people make it work, presumably, but like I couldn't. Like it was. It's hard.
It's so hard.
Even like teaching, like I had a hard time being creative while I was teaching because like it just takes so much time and emotional energy, psychic energy. I generally, when people ask like what should I do, I'm like, get a day job that you don't hate, but that doesn't creatively deplete you, and then do your own thing on the side. Ideally for me, part-time, like doing something. So like I feel like I thrived when I had to get other jobs. It was best when I was doing proofreading or copy editing, because like that doesn't take any of my, like I'm utilizing the things that I developed creatively, but I'm not depleting it, and it's really easy for me to do. I like notice misspellings like really easily, and then I would do that like for 5 hours at a desk, and then I would go home and paint all night or whatever. So that was like my perfect balance. Video games wasn't my perfect balance, but it paid really well, and I did enjoy it. Like every time I do writing for video games, it was before Twitter, and it was like, oh, okay, well, say this thing with this amount of space. You know what I mean? Like it's like you have 140 characters to get this instruction. Like
it's like a puzzle.
Yes, it's like a puzzle. Yeah. Like you have to say this in this amount of space, and make it funny. Yes. And I'm like, yeah. So when Twitter came along, I'm like, yeah, like this is fuck Twitter, but like at the time it was really great. Yeah. Sorry, I just have to say that. But video games was really fun. Okay. And it's fun to tell people that you make video games for a living. But it was a little too fun for me to like have a flourishing creative life in the evenings when I was doing that during the day, or vice versa. Like. But it was nice when I would do that for like 4 to 6 months and do my own thing for the rest of the time.
Right.
It's different for everyone.
Okay. Can we talk about the databases that you keep?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. How important is that work, especially like given right now in the cultural and political climate?
I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
But
the first time I met you, you had mentioned I think it was just the queer artist database at the time, and I remember you mentioning in a talk, it might have even been in this room, but it was like it was hard to sustain because it was so much work and it paid nothing.
Yeah.
And so it really just seemed like a labor of love.
Yeah.
And so, but now you've grown to 3 databases, and
yeah.
so.
I mean, I've got the foundation down, so it's
Okay.
not as much work.
Okay.
And I don't physically enter people, like they enter themselves now. If anyone's a cartoonist of color or disabled or queer, please put yourself in my databases, because editors and gallerists and curators of all sorts, they look in these databases to figure out who they're going to invite and pay to be in their stratosphere. So yeah, I mean, I think it's really helping at the time. Like there was such poor visibility of cartoonists of color, which is the one that I started first.
Yeah.
It was so bad, and now it's much better. But you know, I was like, I can't believe it's been 10 years and I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I didn't think I would need to do it this long, but.
Right. And it's amazing to me though, when I first heard you speak, that I didn't know that something like that didn't exist prior to.
I was surprised that it didn't exist.
I was really shocked. Someone knocking? Hello, come on in. Are we already out of time?
No.
2:03.
Okay. So maybe a couple more questions and then I'll throw it out to anyone.
I mean,
who
but
has-
I also
Yeah.
thought something like that already existed, and it did not. When I Googled, I was looking for cartoonists of color. I was Googling, and there was zero. Like there was, well, almost zero on the internet. Like there was just nothing. There was one website that was talking about cartoonists of color or POC and comics, and it was just like 5 black men who were making mainstream comics. And I'm like, okay, maybe people were right. Maybe there are people of color in comics. But then when I did my own crowdsourcing, you know, through Twitter, and that's how I came up with my initial list. There's like thousands of people on the databases now. Like we're out there, but people know that we're out there. I'm not going to say that my databases changed the culture at all, but like I do think it helped with visibility, and but the culture itself changed, and that was I think it's just part of that culture that changed. But I'm happy to be a part of it.
It's so important. I'd spoken to a student this morning and I said, hey, there's this queer list you should look at. And it's so nice to have those resources as an educator, because students are looking for the stories that they want to see themselves in. And so it's really nice.
There are like queer comics data. There's a queer comics database, which is not queer cartoonists.
Right.
I don't know that I want to see a lot of queer comics made by straight creators, but but you know, I am all for people writing outside of their experience, but also I do not care for when people are kind of using an identity that is not theirs to further their career. That bothers me. So like I'm caught between that, you know.
What's next for you? What are you excited about?
I am excited about embroidering more hippos.
More hippos, more mudang?
Maybe. I don't know. I'm excited to get home and hug my dog and cry about the election. And I am currently the California chapter leader of an organization called Authors Against Book Bans, which, gosh, I was really hoping would be obsolete by now, but I think our work is cut out for us. But I don't know if I have enough energy to keep doing that. Like it's a lot of work. So that's not next, but that's happening.
Sure.
In fact, on this trip, I just saw a bunch of emails from them, from the national organization people, and I'm like, I can't wrap my head around this yet. I feel like right now there's like a big attack on specifically trans people and non-binary and anyone who isn't white and follows like the exact Christian whatever. I don't know. Everything sucks right now. I mean, no.
Yeah. I mean, but it does, and it can, and it will, and it. But we have to find
more.
Yeah. But we have to find those like things that, you know. Yes, the important work. Yes, all of that, but also like these moments of joy, and so that's embroidery and hugging your babies. Like, we have to sustain ourselves somehow too. You know, we can't keep like.
Yesterday, before my San Diego reading, like me and my friend who I was staying with, we just like I brought over like 25 new inks I'd gotten, and we just like swatched them all and geeked out about like the shimmers and the
That's
sheens, and we're just super nerding out about it. And like, I don't know, I need more of that in my life. I need to look at the news last, but like stay active. I don't know. I'm still figuring that out.
Thank you, Mari. Do you all want to ask any questions? Anything that's